Here we are, back in the studio.
Okay, and we keep going with the master classes, and we welcome Maestro Christian Jones.
Hello, Christian. Are you online?
I am online, thank you. Good morning.
Good
I
morning.
need
Morning,
somebody-
Christian. Welcome.
I'm sorry to talk technically about computers. I need somebody to allow me to screen share, please.
Okay, what you ask? Sorry.
For screen share.
I must screen share from my laptop, but because I am not the host, I am not allowed to do this. Somebody must authorize this, please.
Okay, so they will do it. Martina.
Technology.
Okay, technology. Welcome, very welcome to the Italian Brass Week 2020, and nice to meet you because we never spoke in person, and I'm very glad that you took part of this big show. And please, as soon you have the technology ready, you can start with your masterclass.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you very much for having me. I will just try the share screen now.
Great.
Everybody see this?
Yes,
I think
we do.
Okay, I hope my Italian is okay.
Your Italian is fantastico.
Okay, so
Good. Start.
I will start. Buongiorno.
Buongiorno.
E grazie mille per avermi invitato a parlare con voi tutti oggi. Il mio nome è Christian Jones e perdonami per aver continuato in inglese. At the outset, it's important to note that I have no medical training, and I'm offering my insights today into how I continued playing by adapting my breathing and posture after a potentially career-ending injury in September 2014. Not only are there innumerable teaching methods, but there are in fact wide variations in medical and pedagogical opinion on the optimum way for brass players to breathe, especially across different instrument groups. This is why I've placed an emphasis today on the process by which I retrained myself rather than simply the end result. Over the next half an hour, I invite you each to become a gazaladra and steal any ideas which work for you, just as I have done to preserve my playing career. For those who do not know me, I've been performing on bass and contrabass trombones professionally in the UK for 20 years now, as a member in 3 orchestras and in freelance, solo and chamber settings. I've taught at the Royal Northern College of Music in Manchester since 2015. As a youngster, I was exposed to a whole range of theories on the principles of good breathing and posture, enthusiastically adopting several breathing exercises, some of which, in hindsight, were causing excessive tension in my body, with continually supporting the 3 kilogram weight of a bass trombone. For many people watching this, breathing exercises like fast panting and topping up work well, and none of the people teaching them to me meant any harm. But with hindsight, none of them played the bass trombone either. Note my posture in this impromptu photo from the Tyne factory in Bremen in 2009. It's not terrible, but my shoulders are slightly forward and raised, and my head is forward also. It's important to stress that our kinesthetics or proprioception, that is, the sensations we perceive in our own body which underpin our external posture, are subjective and impossible to definitively detect or predict in others. We teachers should be mindful of this, especially across different brass instrument groups which require totally different intensities of air. On this chart, the further to the right an arrow extends indicates an increased flow of air required. The numbers indicate the mean duration in seconds of 4 players surveyed holding the same note. So it's clear that a trombonist playing the same mid-register phrase, just find my cursor, the same mid-register phrase as any other brass instruments is going to have to breathe the most often. I'm not saying that other instruments such as the tuba are easier, of course, only that their more complex design possesses greater inherent resistance, which helps preserve some of the performer's airflow. Mindful of the trombone's demand for breath, as a student and young professional, my primary goal was to suck as much air into my lungs as possible all the time. I was always conscious of my posture and took regular Alexander technique lessons from the age of 16. But each time I got on stage, theory was overruled in the pursuit of taking very physical breaths for repertoire like this. So that's an example of a typical day's work at the Philharmonia Orchestra in London, my old orchestra, recording the Agincourt song in 2 takes. And I distinctly remember doing this session with food poisoning, because the members are all self-employed and need the work. So fast forward to the year of my injury. It's 2014, and by this time I'd relocated with our young family to my job now, Opera North in the north of England. But I was invited back to tour with the Philharmonia Orchestra in Central and South America. As you can see, I soon felt at home with my old friends. But after a concert in Mexico City, I woke the next morning feeling like I'd slept on my left arm. If I move that, you're going to be able to see, aren't you? Rio de Janeiro. After 3 hours, the lower part still felt numb, accompanied with a tingling sensation from head to toe on my left side only. The immediate suspicion was a heart attack or stroke, but once these had been discounted, I joined the orchestra's flight to Lima in Peru. Where we landed, I had to sign an immigration form, and because I am left-handed, the sensation was literally like someone else was controlling the pen. My signature was unrecognisable from the passport one, but luckily I was allowed into the country, where a CT scan that night gave me the definitive all clear from the brain injury perspective. The next day, the tingling had disappeared and I felt a little better, but the numb feeling in my lower left arm was replaced with a sensation of weakness relative to what I could feel in my lower right arm. Since we were on tour, I had no access to my trombone until that afternoon. When we arrived at the concert hall, I unpacked it from the flight case and realised to my horror that I simply couldn't support any weight with my left arm. I hurriedly rigged up a sling to keep my left arm upright and rested it on the orchestra's spare trombone stand for the performance of Sibelius 5 that evening, as reconstructed in that photograph. So obviously that's not on the tour, but that's what I did. So this worked okay for the rest of the tour, but back in the UK, my new reality sunk in. I was 34, with a wife, 2 children, a big mortgage, and I literally couldn't hold a bass trombone for more than a few minutes at a time. I was determined to stay positive. I'm one of life's optimists. So I kept going to work at Opera North, taking care to warm up and practice in short and focused sessions. After around a month, most of the strength returned in my lower left forearm, and I was able to support the weight of a bass trombone again. However, although there was never any pain, a sensation of weakness relative to my right forearm remained. I had a nerve conductivity test that October, showing that none of the nerves in my left arm had actually died, so the immediate medical danger seemed to be over, but I suspected that my injury might be linked to the particularly asymmetric nature of the trombone. So I set about trying to develop my core strength to improve my breathing and posture. So, core strength. Our core refers to the many muscle groups which help stabilise the body from deep within it, and numerous medical texts describe the concept. But while we all know we need good posture, this term is less clearly defined. So here's a good starting point. I'll just lose me. Posture is the dynamic interrelationship between muscular and skeletal tissues. The word dynamic is important because it implies an alignment which is stable rather than static and fixed, and is a prelude to easy flowing movement. Okay, so why is this important for brass players in particular? Well, as the same book I sourced there points out, many muscles used in breathing also have postural responsibilities. When a singer has developed good postural alignment, it is easier to use the abdominal muscles for breath management. Likewise, when the breath is well supported, it is easier to maintain the posture and core stability. So this interdependence between posture and breathing is sometimes overlooked by teachers. Younger students often have little awareness of the position of their body in space because they're still growing, while older players, like me, can become so accustomed to a particular posture it seems impossible to change it. And just like learning to play, if the body has no experience or muscle memory of a particular posture, it struggles to move away from what it's already learned to be normal. The issue of kinesthetics or proprioception is vitally important for brass players, because improving fundamental posture depends on it, and improving breathing depends on posture. I encourage everyone listening to attend a class in any of these disciplines listed or any similar ones. Like I was, you might be surprised to discover what habits have crept in. Now, we're probably all familiar with the maxim, don't practice until you get it right, practice until you can't get it wrong. But in autumn 2014, I needed to develop this idea across my entire body. So my roadmap to recovery evolved like this. So number one, I needed to improve my body awareness, where I am in space. I had to do that before I could then improve my core strength, which also led to having a better posture, and then finally I could breathe more efficiently. So it's so important to stress the interdependence of these four strands to my recovery. We can't just set out one day, wake up one morning and set out one day to improve our breathing without considering our posture first, or improve our posture without possessing the core body strength on which it relies. With hindsight, I can see that while I'd reached a good level of self-awareness by 2014, I was continually correcting my bad posture on stage because the good habits felt less normal than the bad. I was aerobically fit, but simply didn't have the core strength to maintain what I knew and taught to be the correct trombone playing posture, the shoulders slightly down and back. I couldn't do that for any length of time. My wife, Katie Jones, is a tenor trombone player, and she's presenting an Italian Brass Week lecture this coming Tuesday. But back in 2014, she was already using Pilates regularly and suggested that I go along to a local class with her. So one of the first Pilates exercises I performed was to stand with my feet shoulder width apart and raise my arm while trying to maintain the support in my shoulders. Even though it's quite similar to holding a trombone, the Pilates teacher immediately picked me up on the fact that I was rolling my shoulders slightly forward and up. I had known not to do that for 25 years, but once our brains learn a bad posture as normal, or even worse, oh that'll do, it can take months or years to remedy. So here's an everyday example of bending down to pick something up. We all know that it's best to bend at the knees and hips, but usually, out of habit, most of us keep our legs straight and bend at the hips only, putting pressure on our lower back and inhibiting the development of the very muscles, glutes in this case, which would help us to bend down correctly. Each time we move incorrectly, like this, the diagram on the right, it further cements the bad habit in our brain and body. But luckily the opposite is also true when we move correctly. In this positive way, I hope to use regular Pilates and swimming to ensure that my core stability became so ingrained that I hardly ever need correct or think about it. Back to my injury, and numerous inconclusive medical investigations followed during 2015, and I played my first full recital since the injury at Dublin Brass Week that year. But while my posture was improving, the way I was breathing to play still seemed to hark back to my old habits. In particular, I was still getting tense around my neck and collarbone. So, in common with many brass players, especially trombonists, I was leaning my head slightly forwards towards the instrument, especially during large breaths, thereby overusing the sternocleidomastoid muscle pictured. This is one of the accessory muscles we'll discuss later. I see many fine low brass players adopt a similar posture. Usually during the loud playing we all come across in large ensembles, but my injury of course had forced me to think about how I could reduce this upper body stress. So working, as I mentioned, at Opera North, we regularly perform semi-staged operas, just meters from the singers, so we're able to watch them for hours. I became fascinated by how they inhaled in such an efficient way, with so little tension that they could sing out while their bodies were free to move in whatever way the narrative required, whether that's embracing a fellow Valkyrie or stabbing Siegfried, but that's in the next opera, so apologies for the spoiler alert. I approached several singers and received in reply the broad spectrum of opinions one might expect of musicians, but one recommended I take a lesson with a fantastic American soprano named Paula Sides. I'd never heard of the accent method, but it's a voice training system developed in the early 20th century by a Danish speech therapist named Sven Smith. It included rhythmic or accented exercises to aid in the rehabilitation of an injured voice, stutter or stammer. So I don't teach accent method, this is just the very basic principles of it. For my purposes as a gazaladra trombonist, I wanted to see if any small elements of this otherwise comprehensive singing method could assist my recovery. Every time and occasionally in life we have to be a bit selfish, right? I'm trying to look after myself here. So the immediate difference was the way Paula, the singing teacher, asked me to inhale. Underlining the interdependence of the recovery roadmap I showed you a little bit earlier, it was thanks to the Pilates I was already doing that I was already familiar with the concept of releasing and contracting my lower abdominals. So, this is a little bit of an activity for everybody listening. Thank you for following this so far. So, everybody please place their thumbs on your belly button or your navel, okay? With your fingers facing downwards. I'm going to try and get it so you can see on the screen. Okie dokie. Now, you're probably already familiar with the idea of breathing all the way out to feel a natural in-breath as soon as we release the tension. So try this now. Breathe all the way out, all the way out, all the way out, and then relax. Okay. Again, breathe all the way out, 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 and relax. There we go. So, each time we relax after breathing out, what we can feel is the natural reflex of the air rushing into our lungs as the mostly dome-shaped muscle at the bottom of the ribs, called the diaphragm, you've all heard of that, that's suddenly free to contract and then expand the lungs, like this. You can see the movement. Now all muscles, you may know this, all muscles work in contraction and they extend only when they're linked to another contracting muscle, like the movement of the biceps and the triceps in the arm. So that's why this kind of embouchure is stronger than this kind of embouchure. It's the same sort of principle. Now, let's definitively identify these lower abdominal muscles with a low cough. So it's not a throat cough, it's a low cough, like this. Okay, so you need your hands where they were before, thumbs over the navel, and okay, so notice the elastic recoil at the end of each aspiration. Now, you'll have felt a whole set of muscles working, but we're focusing just now on those around and below your navel, below your belly button. So now, just try to relax them, okay? Just try to relax them. Let them go, flop. It's harder than you think, much harder than you think, okay? So now while you're doing this, relax. You see the movement in my thumb? Just very, very slightly relaxing that muscle. Now, I must stress that I'm not pushing my tummy out, I'm just relaxing it. I'm not pushing it out at all. Now, with me, imagine you're blowing out some candles in between allowing these abdominal muscles to relax, like this. So relax, then candles. Relax, then blow out the candle. Okay. Now, without altering your posture, gradually increase the flow of each out breath, like you're having to blow out more and more candles as you get older. You're ensuring you allow your abs time to relax before each next out breath, like this. Relax. Blow out 5 candles. Relax. Blow out 10 candles. So, we need to try this in practice in our own time and don't rush it. It's a very sort of internal feeling. Right, you can all relax now. So this was the first step I took in retraining my breathing, because the accent method used by many singers requires what's called a flexible abdominal wall for each in-breath. It allows the diaphragm, we've just discussed, the space to contract freely and maximise its contribution to our vital lung capacity. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So let's call it belly release inhalation from now on, because that's an easy term to use. This belly release inhalation can eventually, not straight away, eventually facilitate a fast, deep, efficient and almost noiseless in-breath without creating tension in the upper body, because the upper body's busy, right? It's holding a trombone, so you don't want to make it more tense. I probably sound like a salesman now, but actually I took some convincing, and the first time I tried it I was really disappointed, because I built up a lot of expectation on this first lesson with the singing teacher. I felt that it could never work in practice on a brass instrument, and I even said to Paula, the singing teacher, that small volume of air inhaled so slowly, that isn't going to work, that is not sufficient for brass playing. Now, part of the problem I had, I need to go back to share screen now. Part of the problem that I had is that while we've all heard of the diaphragm, our bodies have relatively few sensors around it, so it's notoriously difficult to describe or feel. It's almost impossible to assess all that is going on during singing, or for our purposes when playing. Some key muscles, most crucially for the present discussion the diaphragm, have a relatively poor sensory nerve supply, meaning that we're not generally aware of when they're active. And here's another quote to underline the point from a book that we probably all know. One of the main objections to the instruction in the use of the diaphragm, in pedagogical methods for wind players and singers, is our scant possibility for actively or directly controlling it. The diaphragm is not registered proprioceptively. In other words, we can't feel it. What we can feel, though, is the effect on our outbreath of the diaphragm when it's properly synchronized with the relaxation of the lower abs, as we just tried. With encouragement from Paula, the singing teacher, I persisted in gradually speeding up the sensation of relaxing my abdominals quickly to allow as much space as possible for my diaphragm to deepen each inhalation. After around 6 months of daily practice, I caught myself inhaling like that all the time, even away from the trombone. Better still, I was able to inhale quickly and efficiently enough to sustain phrases as I did before my injury, but with much less upper body tension. So, in addition to improving my proprioception, my weekly Pilates classes also helped me to adopt this new method of inhaling, but in quite an unusual way, because during Pilates we use ribcage or lateral thoracic breathing, because that maintains a connection between the abdominal muscles and spine in strengthening exercises. So, screen share off. Need to find my cursor. So, folks, this is me demonstrating the 2 types of breathing, and I'm going to put my hands so hopefully you can see what's happening. So, if I do the belly release that we've just been discussing, watch how my hand moves a little bit towards the camera like this. Okay, and just to underline the point, I'm not pushing my tummy out. I promise I'm not. I'm just allowing it to relax. I'm flopping into the sofa after a hard day in the office. I'm just allowing it to relax. Now, that's the belly release breathing. This is the lateral thoracic breathing that I said that we use in Pilates. You can see that my hand does not move this way, but it moves a little bit this way as the air goes into the side of my ribs. These are just mental images. Everyone will feel it slightly differently. So in other words, folks, it's a completely different sensation to the belly release inhalation that we tried together about 5 minutes ago. But, I don't want people to sit there thinking, what's he on about? This is completely different. I'm confused, okay? So, they're complementary breathing styles. I'm a keen runner, and there's no way I could use the belly release inhaling that we tried together when I'm exercising. There's no way. What I have to use is something very similar to that Pilates in-breath. But when I check on our kids, I mentioned we have 2 children, when they're asleep at night, I go and check on them, and their tummies and torsos expand in the way that we've just described in belly release breathing. So the 2 styles of breathing are a difference really in only in emphasis, rather than sort of polar opposites in conflict with one another. If nature has provided us with 2 complementary respiratory breathing systems for different circumstances, why not use them both? So far, all we've discussed is the in-breath. We can breathe in. We're pretty good at breathing in. Now, the out-breath is vital to our sounds as brass players, and the out-breath can broadly be categorised as either passive or active. When I see my sleeping kids, their out-breaths are just an elastic recoil of the abdominal and intercostal or rib cage muscles as the raised pressure in our lungs equalises then lowers with respect to that outside, the air pressure outside, before the cycle just repeats. Now, as we all know watching this, that very relaxed exhalation, that very relaxed out breath, that's no good for singing or playing a wind instrument, where we need to actively push or support our out breath to make the kind of sound that people will pay to hear. So what is support? Back to share screen. Okie dokie. So, despite its importance, there is no single and unambiguous definition of support, and the word has different shades of meaning for different singers and teachers. That's not very helpful, is it? So let's turn to world-renowned trombonist Joe Alessi, featuring later this week, who attributes this fantastic quote to his father. So if he's going to use that next week, I apologise for stealing his thunder. Blow through the notes, not at them. In truth, ladies and gentlemen, we can use whatever mental image we like. What we should judge our efforts on is the resulting sound. Personally, I focus simply on the direction of the overall phrase, whether that's a 2-bar orchestral solo, bass trombone bolero, or an entire concerto. As Arnold Jacobs stated, when he was performing, he didn't consider the actual mechanics of breathing at all. And this is coming from someone who understood them better than a lot of medical specialists. I describe my retraining after injury as an ongoing process because I want to keep developing and learning. I don't claim to have got it all right already. My out-breath has changed for me in a more subtle way than my in-breath had to. I now simply try to avoid pushing out to extremes too often because belly release inhaling enables me to take regular, fast but full in-breaths without becoming too tense. If there's one concept I'd like people to take away from this presentation, it's this. We don't suck air into our bodies, we allow it in thanks to air pressure. The fuel we need is all around us and readily available. Wind players and singers need simply to train their bodies to allow it into their lungs in the most efficient way possible. So you can attribute that to me unless you've heard it first from somebody else, I don't mind. In order to show how much the torso of a low brass player moves, I've tried to find a positive from this whole COVID pandemic chaos, and I've taken the opportunity to demonstrate this topless in a way that would never be possible in a masterclass or lesson situation. So please don't ask me to, and avert your eyes if you're of a sensitive disposition. If the videos that I'm about to share don't stream well for anybody, let me know directly or via the festival, and I'll upload them to my YouTube channel. Okay, so life as a brass player is all about teamwork, and in the low brass we often have to sustain loud phrases as well as our colleagues can on the trumpet and the horn. So here are some sections from Shostakovich's Festive Overture, which are notoriously difficult in the low brass for breathing. So, 10 years ago, performing such music would have caused me considerable muscle tension the next day. But these days it feels fine, despite the fact, of course, I'm 10 years older. Just look at my approximation of how I used to do it, with a less flexible belly, shoulders slightly raised, and upper body slightly forward. So, as you can hear, it works, but it's much less sustained, and my muscles were tense for hours after I filmed that last week. For years, this felt to me like the only way to do my job. To emphasise the way I use belly release inhaling across all styles of music, I've lastly recorded this short opening of the Saraband from Bach Cello Suite No. 5. I don't want people to think it's only for Shostakovich. Please bear in mind that these videos are intended solely to illustrate the points in this presentation. The human body comes in a variety of shapes and sizes, and other players will look quite different. In music, the end result of the sound is what matters, as long as the performer, of course, isn't injuring themselves as I did. In broad terms then, what you can see in the videos is plenty of movement away from the abdominals each time I breathe in. The contraction of the diaphragm alone, in fact, contributes only around 60 to 80% of vital lung capacity, which itself is around 80% of our total lung capacity volume. On average, that's about 6 litres for an adult male and 4.5 litres for an adult female. So straight away you can see that women would be at a disadvantage in this regard. Most of the rest of a large inhalation that we use for brass playing is facilitated by expansion of the rib cage, leaving the accessory muscles around the neck and collarbones, such as the sternocleidomastoid mentioned earlier, to make any final expansion of the upper lungs in an action known as clavicular breathing. In exhalation, different contracting muscles around our ribs can act to regulate the airflow in coordination with our abdominals, but these accessory muscles around our collarbones and neck also play a role. So again, from Teaching Brass, Christian's book, efficient use of the intercostal and abdominal muscles and the diaphragm usually obviates use of the accessory respiratory muscles. But in extreme cases where a major ventilation is called for, as for example in tuba playing and probably bass trombone, they may be very important. Measurements show that all the accessory muscles are activated at a ventilation exceeding 100 litres per minute. Tuba players often consume air at 140 litres per minute, which is more than 2 litres per second. And to come full circle, it's these accessory muscles I was almost certainly overusing in the past. I'll come back to me now. These accessory muscles, so up around here, around the neck, around the collarbone. While they evolved to help the top few ribs expand and draw in the very last reserves of air in a fight or flight situation, I was using them more or less daily by thinking that continued clavicular breathing was the only way to play in a loud, sustained manner. So, as you just saw on the videos, I still use my accessory muscles now, but not constantly, and in the past when I combined this overuse with moving my left shoulder up and forwards whenever I played, there appears to have been some sort of restriction in my thoracic outlet, that's here, which tweaked some nerves in my lower left forearm. This is not conclusive, because I was finally signed off by a UK National Health Service vascular consultant this January, just before COVID, after more than 5 years of inconclusive medical investigations involving 4 consultants across 3 hospitals. I spoke to a world-renowned chronic pain specialist who said that I could be imagining the ongoing sense of weakness, now much diminished, it's much better, and I've had some success with myofascial release on my left wrist with a physiotherapist. The moral to take away from this story is to stay positive and face problems calmly and rationally if and when they arise. Communicate with others, because musicians seem uniquely terrified of disclosing any physical or mental injury or distress to their peers or teachers. With determination and the help of others, I've not missed one day of work through this episode, and now I enjoy my playing and teaching more than ever. It is remarkable how much we realise what is really important to us only after it's almost been taken away. So, grazie per l'ascolto.
Thank you very much for your wonderful masterclass. And now we have a contribute from our sponsor, and and later on we are on studio. Thank you.